I am Julie. I think Erica's going to be logging in here soon. She's my wife, but we are the founders of Love Gen. And right now we've kind of made a pivot to be a resource website for people who are dealing with loss, death, and grief. We eventually want to grow into be the not for the death industry. But right now we're really trying to figure out how we can brand and talk about death in a modern way to make it more approachable for people to respond to.
Julie, do you want to pick the next person, whoever you can see on your grid?
Sure, I can see, is it Aram? I hope I'm saying that correctly.
I can't hear you. No. Still can't hear you, but you can type out your intro or introducing yourself in the chat, and then Julie can pick someone else in the meantime.
Let me look at my grid. Delphine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julie. My name is Delphine, and I'm the founder of Humble Ceramics. We are a micro manufacturer based in South LA, and we make high-end artisanal tableware for the B2B industry and B2C.
Delphine, do you want to pick the next person?
Yes. How about Margot?
I love how you say my name. Thank you. I'm Margot. I'm one of the co-founders of Margot and Linda's Vegan Kitchen. We make grab-and-go clean food, and we sell to Whole Foods and various retailers in Southern California. We're about to launch our e-commerce site officially and start selling direct to consumer. So that's pretty exciting.
Anyone else who wants to come off camera and introduce themselves? And if not, that is totally fine.
I'm happy to introduce myself. I just am having Wi-Fi connection issues, so you won't be able to see me properly, but I'm Mika Lejean. I'm CEO and co-founder of 2Swim, and 2Swim is a social messaging app with an emphasis on close connections and private communities. We are currently invite only for Black, Indigenous, and POC, LGBTQIA+, or women-centric groups. And I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. I think those were...
I can also introduce myself.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm the founder of Free Malaya. We partner with schools, organizations, and communities to foster free and liberating spaces for LGBTQIA+ youth, particularly Black and Brown youth, through queerly responsive tools, resources, and professional learning for educators.
Anyone else? I think that's most everyone, and I think the rest is just tuning in for today. So we can get started with the presentation.
Yay, so this is how I'll do it. I'm going to do, based off the questions that I was sent, I originally was just going to do a little free-form discussion, but now I'm just going to do my regular presentation. I've modified it a bit for y'all, and I'm going to go through it, and then if you have questions, I just ask that you hold them to the end, but feel free, of course, I won't be able to see chat, but feel free to drop in your questions into chat and as we're going along, and I'll answer them at the very end when we get through everything. So if anything sparks a question, feel free to just drop it in so you can make a note of it. All right, everyone. So we are going to get into something very fun today, and that is understanding how you can build your personal brand in 2020. Now, I'll just ask, just because we are recording this for everyone else to listen to later, if you have your microphone on, I ask that you mute it now, just so there's no feedback or anything like that for everyone else who's going to listen to this presentation later. So please mute your microphone. You don't have to turn off your video, but just mute the sound. Okay, so let's get into this. How can leaders build unshakable brands in 2020? Now, I titled this particular talk this way because we are going through a really different time right now. 2020 is, let's be honest, 2020 is a tough time to just exist. But 2020 is an incredibly tough time to be a leader or to run a brand. So we're going to get into how to run your brand when you are a leader. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from Ava DuVernay, an amazing LA resident here. When you're in your own lane, there's no traffic. And I love this quote because I think it really encapsulates what's most important about building a personal brand, which is not trying to necessarily copy or become something else. It's to create your own space that's uniquely yours to build your personal brand in. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of why I'm here talking to you today. This is a hilarious quote. One of the first times a piece in press mentioned me. If you haven't met the Oprah of LinkedIn, you should. So that's my nickname. Here's a little bit more about me. Normally, I am traveling the world doing quite a bit of speaking. Obviously, not right now. I'm the CEO at Warm Robots, which is a social strategy agency based here beautifully in Los Angeles and Dallas, Texas. And I also write for Forbes on personal branding and storytelling in the digital age. I recommend that you check out some of the articles. I try to do really tactical, interesting articles that help you learn how to better build your business, build your brand, have case studies, etc. I'm a LinkedIn top voice, which means that LinkedIn has chosen me to represent what they consider one of their best creators on the platform, specifically for social media. I'm also in the Producers Guild New Media Council because I love content. I love making content. And then here's a whole slew of places that I've been featured in. Okay, so we're going to go over quite a few things today. So once again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into chat and I will try to get through all of them when I'm done. So we're going to go over why build a personal brand. What do leaders worry about? What do entrepreneurs worry about? The 5 C's of personal branding, social media platforms to leverage, and then because I am a school teacher, you will get homework. Okay, so another quote to start us off. You are the CEO of your life. You have the power to stage and compose it the way you want it to be. So super important that you understand that a personal brand is something you have ownership over. So often we let other people define our personal brand for us because it's quite honestly easier to have someone else tell us who we are instead of us telling other people who we want to be. Also, I should let you know I'm a huge space nerd, so my entire slides will be themed with beautiful space imagery. If you don't like space, I'm sorry. So let's start with why build a personal brand? Okay. So when we're thinking about building a personal brand, I'm going to go over each of these, but we have building credibility, strengthening our network, sharing our wealth of knowledge, being a stronger advocate for internal and external causes. And if you are, having a job or you're looking to also be part-time employed, having higher job stability. I'm going to quickly pause and say, Craig, we can hear your iPhone, so you might want to mute your microphone. All right, so next slide. Okay, so we're going to think about strengthening your network. So this, I like to start here because this is absolutely one of the most important tenets of building a personal brand, which is the more people you know, the more you can do. Absolutely, if you have a bigger, broader network, even if you think that the people who are currently in your network can't directly help you with what you want to do, it always helps because they know people and those people know people, etc. So the question I leave for you, and I'm going to leave you a ton of questions for today that I want you to just start processing. How can we partner with more people in our network? So how can we think about who is just generally in our network and be better about reaching out, saying hi, and reconnecting, I think, with a lot of people that maybe we've lost touch with, just to see what they're working on. Once again, because 2020 is such an interesting year, you may not know what people have, and I apologize for this overused word, pivoted to. Because a lot of people and a lot of brands have been changing the direction of where they're going because 2020 has been so difficult. So make sure that you are regularly reaching out back to your network, and also you're regularly telling your network what it is you're doing and what it is you're working on. Okay, share what you know. I always love this one. The best way to learn is to teach. And that is actually why I am, of course, here today teaching you about personal branding, because I find that every time I teach this or do a session, I learn more about personal branding. But for you, that will obviously be something different. It will be whatever is in your wheelhouse. For example, maybe that's teaching something about ceramics, maybe that's teaching something about grief, etc. By sharing what you know, you can become a thought leader in your space. So I want you to ask yourselves, what can you teach to others today? What is a subject matter that you want to be known for? Okay, and because I personally believe that the best kind of personal brand is a brand that has an opinion, it's very helpful to have causes that you believe in and that you're putting your personal weight behind. What do I mean by that? I mean, you have to have an opinion. You have to be able to say, I believe in X. Now, it's not always going to be the craziest, biggest opinion, like you believe spaghetti monsters are going to take over the world in 2021, but it can be something as simple as you believe in supporting women in business, right? So have causes that you're known for believing in. So who on your team, and of course, when you're running a business, your team is going to be very small, but who on your team also believes in these causes, or who on other teams or other small entrepreneurial groups or other entrepreneurs who also believes in this that you can begin to partner with. It seems a little counterintuitive to focus on outside causes outside of building your business, but it's really helpful because once again, it opens up your network. So if people believe and know that you really care about supporting women, they might pull you on to speak at a conference, for example, where you might meet other women who then can support you further, etc., etc. Okay, so this one might not be and probably isn't relevant for quite a few people on here, but I have to throw this one in case folks on this call are currently working in a part-time job while you are launching your startup. I think it's still helpful to say this, which is if you are in a workplace right now, but just in general in your network, if they know who you are, they'll want to keep you around. And I think that's super helpful just for building your personal brand in general. If they know who you are, they're more likely to include you in new projects, in new collaborations, and pull you onto boards, etc. And this, of course, is the question we're going to be answering for the entire rest of this talk. How can you create an indispensable personal brand? Okay, so having a personal brand as a leader truly sets up everyone, including your team, for success in any climate. So if you're running your own brand, and say you don't have any employees, it's really you probably might have at least a contractor or two who comes on board occasionally for you and works with you. And in that case, I want you to understand that you already are a leader, even if you don't necessarily have employees who are working under you. And building your personal brand helps when you bring in even consultants or contractors, helps them understand who you are and what your ethos is before you even get started. Okay, so what do leaders worry about? And here's my quadrant of worries for leaders. And once again, this really depends on if your team is big or small, but I think to a certain degree, every single team leader or entrepreneur worries about all of these things. So we have team, resources, priorities, and optics. And so each of these 4 things I'm going to go over right now, but understand that, of course, priorities, everything shifts based off of what is happening in the world and also what is happening in your current role. Okay, so let's start with team. I personally absolutely adore dictionary definitions, for better or for worse, for words like this. So, team, the direct reports or sections reporting to a leader. So this is something I want you to think about when you are running your small team. So either people who are partnering with you and they're a fellow entrepreneur on your team, if you're a partnership of 2, or if you once again have consultants or contractors or even employees working under you, when you think about your team, what are the demographics of the team that you have brought together and what are their needs? So what do I mean by what are their shared needs? I mean, what can you do to make sure that they are set up better for success? Do they need new software? Do they need better support or check-ins? What are the specifics that would help your team become more successful? And of course, budget is always limited. So let's get into resources. So I'm not going to read out loud the definition for resources, but essentially resources can be anything from money, materials, staff, other assets, etc. I heard from somebody else earlier this week that they don't like to think about people as resources, but I think thinking about people as resources is really beautiful because water is a resource and we all need water to live. Similarly, even if you are currently the only person working on your amazing startup, you probably at some point will need more than just you working on that particular product or project as you grow. So we always need more and more resources as we grow. Now, the question, of course, whenever we think about our resources is what do we have on hand to deal with this problem? I always try to frame it this way because resources tend to come into play when things go a little bit wrong. And one way to get ahead of this is to already know what resources you have. Now, once again, what does that mean? It means keeping better track of contractors and consultants that you can bring on board last minute. If you say get a huge contract in for your startup, it could also mean, for example, understanding where funding sources may or may not be coming from, and really, once again, organizing your list of resources and organizing where the resources are coming from. Okay, priorities. I think we all struggle with priorities the most. And priorities is the factor or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. So whenever you're thinking about your priorities as a leader, what is the greatest issue to address first? When everything is flame balling around you, which issue is the most urgent? Sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and really list out very plainly which of the issues should be attacked first. Now, of course, we will always be in situations where we have to address issues concurrently at the same time, but it is still helpful to have, this is the top priority, then we have our next one, then we have our next one. Once again, just listing these things out will help clarify things for you as a leader. And it makes you look really good that you know how to handle multiple fires at once. Okay, optics. This is actually the number one thing that people think of when they think of a personal brand. They kind of ignore the other three. I like to do this one last because it's so obvious. The optics are the way in which an event or course of action is perceived by the public. So how do other people think about what you've done, either with, say, a launch of your product or just you personally with your personal brand publicly? Optics are very helpful to consider when you start bringing in, say, someone to handle your PR. It's really helpful to think about optics when you're thinking about launching a product publicly or doing any sort of announcement. Optics are what we filter all of that information and data through. It's helpful just to know, to try to expect how people will react. So instead of thinking in our own little bubble of how would we react, how would our ideal audience react? Okay, so what are the 5 C's of personal brand that can weather any storm? So here are the 5 C's: confidence, curiosity, credibility, catalyst, and commitment or culture. Okay, confidence. Confidence is such a tricky subject, and I got a quick question when I was looking through the list of questions that everyone had already submitted. Confidence is tough, mostly because confidence comes from a place of calm. So if you ever struggle with feeling confident, I think it's always best to try to search for another emotion instead, and that's a sense of calm. Because we have all been in the room when something is going terribly wrong, and there's that one calm person, and somehow that calmness is incredibly magical, and that calmness comes across as confidence. And having confidence in your personal brand helps you get more resources, right? It helps people believe that you can handle any crisis, but even more than that, it makes people believe that you just know what you're doing in general, and that they should, for example, say, give you money or give you other kinds of resources. So we always want to strive for real confidence and not ego, because ego is a dangerous path, because ego is empty confidence. Ego usually comes from a sense of fear and insecurity. And we want confidence that comes from a sense of calm and sureness and having a clear direction and having things, once again, laid out in an orderly list of actions. Even if that list goes out the window when something happens, we always want to strive for calm. Because calm will inspire trust. So the more reliable we can be, the more we will inspire trust in others. And once again, the more business we can do, the better partnerships we can achieve. I cannot tell you how much confidence can help you in any room. So this is the question I leave you with. How can we be stronger speakers, brand or team advocates in public, especially when we don't feel we're being heard? Now, I know some of you are saying, well, I don't do any public speaking. I probably will never do public speaking. But if you represent your brand, and even if you do something as simple as, say, an IGTV or an IG Live, that is still essentially public speaking. You're still representing your brand. And once again, the more confident you can appear about your brand and about the product that you're building, the better. Because confidence and not ego is incredibly attractive in most situations. Okay, curiosity. Curiosity is so important to have in your brand as a leader because it shows that you are willing to listen. So another word for curiosity is the ability to listen to others. Now, as you're building your brand or as you're leveling up your brand too, and I'm talking, of course, about the brand that you're building and then your personal brand. So as you are building out your brand, whether that is just, we'll just call it your startup. As you're building your startup, it's helpful to know what your audience cares about. It's helpful to know what your consumers and potential consumers care about. And having curiosity about them will help you grow a better product. And having curiosity in general, and putting that forward and always being a person who questions makes your brand so much stronger. And I think often about strong leadership brands where they are at the top of their game and they're still asking questions. And that is a really beautiful, humble characteristic because once again, the strongest personal brands are not ego-driven, they're confidence-driven. And asking questions and staying humble in that manner is super, super helpful. So how can we be better listeners when there's so much noise happening in the world? And I'll give you the answer to this one. We do this by focusing in on a certain demographic of people that we want to listen to, whether that's our peers, or that's our potential client base, or that's the people that we want to start to talk to who are a level above us. It's helpful to narrow down on who we want to listen to. Okay, credibility. This, I feel, ties in so much to confidence and calm, but the ability of being trusted and believed in. The best brands in the world have strong credibility. Now, I'll mention a brand that I currently work with as an ambassador, so that's my disclaimer, but I've loved them since college and I think they're amazing, and that's Adobe. So I've used them forever and ever and ever. I've used Photoshop forever. So to me, as a brand, they have incredibly high credibility because I trust this product. I use this product almost daily, and it usually doesn't let me down. Now, as a personal brand, you want to inspire that same kind of credibility because once again, it will help you down the line. I know some of you maybe aren't thinking about this right now, but as your business grows, which we'll just, fingers crossed that it absolutely will, you will have to grow your team. And if you yourself as a leader are incredibly credible, then more people will want to join your team because they know who you are. And you can pick the best talent for your team. You can pick the best contractors, consultants, etc. Because you will have credibility, and hopefully your brand or your startup will also have credibility. And these are a double whammy. When you have both in place, people will run up to you and want to join and work with you, and they'll want to partner with you because people are naturally attracted to credible sources. It's not necessarily the sexiest trait, but there's a sense of stability there. And we don't have a lot of stability right now in our world. So being a source of stability for others is very, very helpful. So this is the question I leave you with, which is, how can we position ourselves as thought leaders in an ocean of calm in crisis? So how can you be a thought leader for whatever vertical it is you are creating your product in? A catalyst. This is one of my favorite parts of building a personal brand, because it is unexpected. Because you might expect that you need to be believable to have a personal brand. You might expect that you should be confident, but people don't always think about being a catalyst. I love the word catalyst, mostly because I was a biology major for my undergrad, but I think it's such a great word because it's a person or thing that precipitates an event or change. That means that you're known, your personal brand is tied to being someone who changes the world, right? Or world is very big, changes your own slice of the world. So being a catalyst means that you're known for starting these events and helping move forward change. And of course, when we think about being a catalyst, it's so helpful to be someone that encourages, if we do have a team, our team to be open to change and open to changing themselves and open to changing their course of action. And how can we be those agents of change when everything is happening around us, right? How do we be change in the middle of change? And once again, I think this is part of personal branding that people often miss, which is even when everything is hectic and crazy around you, you can still control at least parts of your personal brand. Things that you can control include what kind of content you write and put out there, or create and put out there, what kind of people you're reaching out to, etc. We always have at least some small things that we have control over that we can change ourselves. Okay, I love the idea of commitment and culture. And this is something that we usually leave to the wayside because we're too busy handling all of the other things. But with our personal brand, it's so helpful that we set the right culture for who we are and the kind of people and other brands that we associate ourselves with. Because if you notice, when you see a person and all they do is they associate themselves with, say, all these negative brands, you're likely going to think that they're a negative person. It's just a fact of the matter. Versus if you see somebody who associates themselves with, say, all artist colonies, you're going to think that they definitely like artists and probably want to support them. So it's very helpful to think about how we want to build out both our culture of how we're perceived, but also the culture of every other link outside of us. And this comes back to networking. How do we build a really strong culture in our network? And I'll go ahead and answer that for you. We reach out to the right kind of people. Okay, so now we're going to go into our social media platform. So I've kind of sped through a lot of this, a lot of information, because I want to be able to get to your questions and make sure that we have enough time for that. So with our social media platforms, here's 4 that I want you to really consider being on. And I'll tell you, it's really only important to be on 3 of the 4. So let's start with the most important one, LinkedIn. As you're building out your personal brand, especially as an entrepreneur, you need to have a presence on LinkedIn. And I will add something on top of that. You need to have a professional appearance on LinkedIn. So as we are creating our brand on LinkedIn, we just want to make sure that we are focused on building out the kind of personal brand that, say, if investors are looking at our LinkedIn, that looks good. If potential clients or customers are looking at our LinkedIn, it looks good. If our peers that we might want to partner with look at our LinkedIn, it looks good. You want to think through every single one of these categories and think, is it appropriate what my LinkedIn currently looks like? Because too often I've noticed that people, especially entrepreneurs, when it's really just you running your business, your LinkedIn looks a lot like your Facebook. So I'm going to tell you 2 things to not include in your LinkedIn picture. Please don't include firearms, weapons, anything like that, or alcohol. Please be more or less fully clothed. All of these things, please keep them in mind on LinkedIn. And I'm not telling you to change who you are at all, but you want to keep LinkedIn a lot of it more conservative than your other platforms, because this is where decision makers who can directly affect your business live. So we want to give them enough of a chance to get to know us before being, say, off-put by us, right? So let's get on to the other 2 platforms that I think are really important to think about joining if you're not already on them. Twitter is another one that's very helpful, and it's a little bit of one of those ancient social media platforms now. I love it because it is a great place to get organic PR. So if you can't afford a PR agency right now, or you want to just do it yourself to start, Twitter is a great place where folks who work in press, and I myself work in press, look for stories, look for trending stories, because a lot of them pop up on Twitter. So a lot of times people are looking for interesting feedback or looking for interesting trends on Twitter. So it is very helpful to be on Twitter. Even if you're not necessarily contributing to the conversation, it's helpful to know what is the conversation that's happening in the world. And of course, even better is to regularly create content on Twitter that encourages people to be interested in you and also whatever brand that you're building. And once again, keep it professional. And let's actually quickly go back to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still a great place to do organic content. What do I mean by organic content? I mean creating the kind of content, either written status messages or videos or images, that you're not putting money behind. So putting out content on LinkedIn is going to be helpful to start because it's free to play. So essentially the only thing that you're paying for, unless you're doing it yourself, is the actual content. Now let's skip ahead to Instagram. I'm going to assume that most people on this call have an Instagram of some sort. And the reason why Instagram is one of the most popular platforms out of these 4 is because Instagram is visual. And Instagram is so helpful if you have any kind of brand that lends itself to being very, very visual, to having beautiful imagery, etc. And one platform that I didn't include on here, but I'd like you to also consider, is Pinterest. I've recently become more and more fascinated with Pinterest just because it's a really great place to build out if you have something that's visual. And I'll tell you this big secret. Opposed to Instagram, which right now you can't really do link outs on Instagram. I mean, you can do products and tag the products, but you can't put links on Instagram. You can put links on Pinterest. And as we all know, having places and being able to choose where people go on a post is super helpful. Okay, let's get into the last platform, the dark horse of these 4 social media platforms. I myself, as my agency does quite a bit of consulting, we actually don't focus on Facebook that much anymore, mostly because my agency does a lot of organic social media content. So we don't like to do pay to play. And Facebook absolutely is pay to play. So even if you're posting an image on your page, it likely will need something that's called a boost. It will likely need some money behind it. Now, two things about Facebook, though, are still really strong, and pretty much none of the other platforms have beat them in this particular area. And that is Facebook groups, which still has super high engagement, and then Facebook ads, which I have a friend who works in Facebook ads and he's constantly complaining, but from what I hear, it is still the very, very best place to have your ads come out of. And from Facebook, you can of course place ads also on Instagram. And it's going to be the cheapest ad system out of pretty much every single other ad system out there, minus, and this will surprise you, Snapchat. But once again, is your audience on the platform? Let's start there. So I've gone through every one of these platforms, and the first question you need to start with is my audience on this platform? Because if your audience is 10 to 14-year-old girls, honestly, they probably won't be on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is still important to have. They probably won't be on Twitter. So maybe Twitter is less important for your brand. It's really helpful to know, where does your audience live? And I'll leave you with this on brand awareness. If no one is listening or paying attention to you, then you don't have a brand. That's it, full stop. Okay, so this is my homework for you. I want you to organize one virtual event. Now, this could be a virtual lunch, a meetup, a fun activity like a happy hour. I want you to encourage at least 5 other people to attend it. And once you've done it, I want you to make sure that you screen cap it, or you take some video of it, and then you write up or document your thoughts on the activity and put it on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or any of these other platforms. And this is going to be, if you haven't started, your first piece of personal branding content. And then of course, if you're interested in following me, note I haven't even listed my Facebook. Feel free to connect with me on any of these platforms. And I'll throw this out there too. When you are thinking about reaching out to very important people, I caution you about Facebook. So I also work in personal branding for C-level executives of Fortune 500 companies. And one of their greatest pet peeves is when people reach out to them about work on Facebook, when Facebook is clearly denoted as a place that they're only connecting with friends and family. So sliding into somebody's DMs, quote unquote, on Facebook isn't always going to land well. In fact, it can be quite invasive and annoying. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, where should I outreach to people on different platforms? And I will say, honestly, Instagram is similar, because a lot of people have Instagrams to just have it as their personal account. So sliding into somebody's Instagram when they clearly are posting just pictures of their family and asking for, say, funding isn't, once again, always going to land well. But doing the same thing on LinkedIn, totally appropriate. And depending, doing the same thing on Twitter can also be appropriate, especially if what they're mostly talking about is work and they say something like, DMs are open. Okay, so we've gone through a lot. I'm going to stop sharing. Hello, everyone. And I'm going to start to read through all of these questions. Okay, so first of all, I'm terrible at saying names, but hi, Aram. Great. That sounds like a great product that you are building right now. Okay, so I'm going to read through the questions. Once again, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I will be happy to answer them right now. If you want, feel free to turn on your video. If you don't want to turn on your video, you don't have to. Welcome to Friday. This is not even Friday afternoon, Friday early morning. Okay, from Julie. How do you make the decision to brand yourself versus brand the cause or product? Is there a good percentage that you should showcase? Oh gosh, I'm going to give you an answer that you don't like. And that answer is you have to brand both. Oh, it's the worst, right? Because if you yourself, I'll give an example, are a painter. One of my friends is a painter and she has her own personal brand as an artist. And then her style of art is its own separate brand. And the reason why these two exist, and they obviously exist in really good balance with each other, you have to have both. Now, especially as a startup founder, I think about a startup that I met in Dallas, and they do automatic dog food dispensing. That's their product. And it's two co-founders. And so they have their own personal, each of them individually has their own personal brand. And then their dog food product has its own brand. And I'll tell you the reasoning behind this. The reasoning behind this is, if you say magically make this brand into a huge success and your next product is, I don't know, crock pots, then you want to be able to stand on the own 2 feet of your own personal brand and have it be a little bit more independent of the current thing that you're working on. Now, maybe the current thing that you're working on is your lifelong passion, and this will be the only thing you ever work on. Then it can be incredibly integrated. Then you really want to think about a 50-50 split. But when you're building out your personal brand as an entrepreneur, and you have this product that maybe isn't your lifelong passion, but it is your passion for now, you want to be really careful that you yourself still have a voice, and this product separately also has a voice. Okay. Let me see, from Delphine, do you consider time a resource? Absolutely, of course time is a resource. We don't have enough hours in the day to get things done. I actually, doing this talk, I just turned down something else during this time to be able to do this. So that's a great example of how time is such a resource. So when we're thinking about building out a personal brand, obviously you're building a business. Your personal brand is not going to take you 98% of your life, right? And if it does, I worry about the project that you're building out. But when we're thinking about building out our personal brand, it's helpful to think about starting to build in 30 minutes a day, right? Which an hour a day, which we may or may not have, but 30 minutes to an hour a day to think about building out a personal brand. And that can be as simple as taking that 30 minutes to 1 hour a day and reaching out to 3 new people, 5 new people. Or it might be as simple as writing a status message on LinkedIn that keeps people in your already existing network updated with what you're doing. So if that's something like you were just on a virtual panel talking about grief and wellness, that can be something that you mention on LinkedIn, and that will probably take you less than 30 minutes to write that post. But every time you do one of these actions, it helps build. Now, I know also, because shoemaker doesn't have shoes. I sometimes get overwhelmed myself with how much interaction I get on social media. I will say, whenever I log on to LinkedIn, everything says 99. So every notification says 99 messages, 99 likes, 99, etc. And so I don't always get a chance to follow up on things, but segmenting out time, once again, that 1 hour a day. I'm not asking you guys for the sun and the moon and stars, 1 hour a day to go through your notifications, to see what's trending, to take that time and really silo it off and not be doing other things at the same time. Because I know we're all tempted to multitask. We're all tempted to do a million things at once. I absolutely understand it. Turn off Netflix, turn off Hulu, whatever streaming platform you're watching. You cannot be doing other things while you do this, because you'll be distracted, and everyone can budget out an hour a day. Okay. Also from Delphine, do you recommend creating a dedicated brand page? Yes, especially if people have, especially if you have a product that people will eventually be able to purchase, or they will have a link to join a community, etc. You want to have a dedicated brand page. Now, this dedicated brand page can live in a bunch of different places. I think it's, once again, very helpful just to have a page on LinkedIn. I'm giving you guys all resources that cost literally $0.00. So creating a brand page on LinkedIn is free. Creating a brand Twitter is free. Creating a brand Instagram is free. I can keep going, guys, with what is free and what you can do today. In fact, I would suggest that, because I always love to plan for the future, that you will all be fabulously wealthy and your brands will be magical and blow up. So get on every single one of these important platforms and take your name. Because if you don't already own your brand name, somebody can come along and take it and use it for something else. Once again, I'll give a case in point about my own brand. My name is Goldie Chan, and on Instagram, there's a girl in Hong Kong who posts really terrible pictures of her food, and she took at Goldie Chan on Instagram first. I have tried to DM her and gently ask if I can purchase it off of her, and she just said hi and followed me on Instagram, which was not the intentional goal. But I guess for now we're friends, and I still don't have that handle. So you want to make sure that you avoid this situation and you get your handles now. So that is, let's add that to your list of homework. If you don't already have all of your handles across different platforms, I'll list them out for you right now. I want you to go and just sit on them right now, because once again, it is free. Okay, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and bonus, YouTube. Boop. Okay, so we want to just in case we decide to suddenly do video content, we want to make sure that we just own all of these different places, right? So we just have we have all of these things waiting for us to start developing our brand. And I'm not talking about our personal brand necessarily in this case. I'm talking about whatever entrepreneurial product we're doing. Now, second piece of homework is to do the same thing with your personal brand, because you will be shocked at how many people blow up all of a sudden and get famous, and then they can't get their own handles on social media platforms, despite some of these platforms trying to get those handles for them. So you want to make sure you get all the handles for both your brand that you're building, but also for your personal brand, for your name, and have that be consistent if you can across every platform. So it might even be a nickname that you use, but you use that consistently. That way, if somebody is looking for you on Instagram, they can find you on Twitter, etc. Okay. What is your tip for the text you provide on Instagram? I'm going to assume that you mean the text in the, I'm like scrolling down. I'm going to assume that you mean the little text blurb that you have in Instagram. So I love emojis, but I also feel that emojis can be overwhelming and overused. So when I see people who do 12 emojis in a row on their Instagram descriptor, first of all, Google can't search that expletive, right? So don't use 12 emojis also and then assume that everyone can understand what those emojis mean. Let me tell you, this might shock you, but certain emojis have multiple meanings that you may not be accounting for. So you want to be really careful, first of all, about what emojis you use. So that's my emoji lecture super fast. But when you're thinking about the text you want to use there, so it depends. So for your personal brand, what is helpful is if you say something like founder at Evolve, say your brand is called Evolve, and you do founder at, and then the @ sign Evolve. You probably want to mention that you are running your brand. Please put that in your Instagram descriptor for your own personal brand. And you're going to do, once again, the @ and because you're going to have, yay, we got our handles. So we're going to have the separate brand page that you can now tag. Now, what's also helpful is, and this is where you can get fluffier, right, is to have some descriptor adjectives that you want to do. Sometimes what people like to do, and I think this is totally fine for your personal brand, is to do something like wife, triathlon runner, you know, like putting in a couple of those things, totally okay. What is distracting is when you put in 12 of those things. So I'm going to give you a limit. You can only put in 2 or 3 of those kind of other descriptors that describe you. And then what we want to do is, if we have extra space, of course, we also want to make sure we put in a link. So either we're going to link to our LinkedIn profile, or we're going to link to our brand. Give you a choice of 2 right now, in case you're curious and you don't want to decide on it. Either link to actually your brand URL, or link to your personal LinkedIn profile. And of course, this link can change. So say you get featured in Entrepreneur magazine tomorrow. Well, gosh, that link in your profile on Instagram should be that entrepreneurial feature that you just got. And in fact, it should go along with a LinkedIn in-feed post that says, we just got featured in Entrepreneur magazine. Click link in profile to check it out, right? So, and we'll leave it there for maybe a week before we once again move it out. But if it's important enough, if it's a big enough feature, it's okay to leave it up for a while. But I will caution you against leaving up links for smaller magazines, you know, random vlogs that cover you. Those ones can go up for a couple of days, but we don't want to distract from using these smaller features from our brand or sending people just directly to our LinkedIn. Okay, so what is your, okay, TikTok. I avoided talking about TikTok because TikTok is currently in flux. Now, I will say with TikTok, it depends on who your audience is, right? I know that TikTok is starting to skew older, and so it becomes more relevant for older audiences. And note, I didn't talk about Snapchat really either as well. TikTok to me is a place where you can magically hit upon and become a personal brand overnight. However, the caveat. However, usually the people who do that are like, I'm thinking of the Willy Wonka TikTok, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It's a guy who literally dresses like Willy Wonka and now has the most followers on the TikTok platform after one post. Okay, so let's dissect that a little analytically. If you are doing a brand, and I keep mentioning some of these brands that I just heard earlier, guys, if you're doing a brand on vegan food and you're known as the Willy Wonka TikTok guy, do you think that people will necessarily immediately think, I want to buy vegan food from this guy who dresses like Willy Wonka? Let's use our common sense, right? Now, let's say you have a candy brand. And you get known as the guy who dresses like Willy Wonka. Wow, wow, wow. Like your personal brand totally tied into your entrepreneurial product. Bam, you have a win. But for the most part, for most of the people that I see do really well on TikTok, and there are, of course, exceptions to the rule, their personal brand that they're known for on TikTok, I mean, people become influencers on TikTok who are just known for literally just themselves and not the brand that they're building. And so if the point is you want to promote the brand that you're building, whatever you create, if you decide to do TikTok, it should be directly tied to whatever brand you're actually building, right? So once again, if I was doing that dog food dispensary brand, I would do TikToks around dogs. I wouldn't do it around Willy Wonka because that would be weird. So you want to make sure they're tied together. They make sense. Okay, so I'm not quite sure which part this was referencing, like a webinar or IG Live, any concrete tips about what posts should look like from text to captions, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to assume that this is, homework. Okay, so this should just be something like even as simple as setting up a Zoom call like this, or setting up a Google, I mean, because Zooms are restricted, usually unpaid, to 40 minutes. So setting something up as simple as a Google Meet or really any of these other video platforms, setting that up. So I actually don't mean an IG Live, because to me, an IG Live is you talking to an audience, right? Kind of like what's happening now is that, you know, I am answering questions, but it's not as interactive as normally what a Zoom call would be. But if you do something like Google Meet or a true Zoom meeting where everyone is talking with each other, it becomes much more interactive. And the whole point is we are fostering community. And that's what I want the homework to be, is I want you to start thinking about building your network in terms of building a community. It's not you lecturing other people. It's you talking with other people. We have that listening aspect in the gate. Okay. From Erica, any advice for when you have several public identities? Okay. Work in public speaking space, opening restaurants, starting a business focused around death. Want to create a personal brand, but I feel I have all these buckets that get confusing as to who I am and what I do. Totally valid question. You know, the crazy thing about being human is that we probably all have 5 or 6 different personalities, different interests, probably more like 1 billion if you live in Los Angeles, let's be honest. It's so hard to narrow down. And that is exactly why you have to do it. Because if you have ever met somebody just randomly, right? And they go like, hi, I'm Michelle. And I do, and then they list out 12 things that they do. Versus they're like, hi, I'm Michelle and I do vegan catering. You're like, which Michelle are you going to remember? You're going to likely remember, even if this Michelle is gorgeous and this Michelle is not, even in LA, we are probably going to remember, oddly enough, this Michelle, because she told us, or they told us, whatever it is that was just really narrowly defined. So that's the first piece of bad news. You have to narrowly define yourself. It's not a choice. It will make things easier for other people when they meet you. That doesn't mean you aren't allowed to have 50 million things happening in your life and be interested in a ton of things. This is not at all about your personal life. This is about your public persona. And your public persona should be narrowed down. Now, when you are doing all of these things all at once, what is helpful is to not think about the items that you're doing. It's to think about the personality that you bring to the table, your ethos that you bring to the table. So say you're naturally known, or you want to be known as somebody who is really warm and thoughtful, and asks a lot of great questions, that can still tie through a lot of these different projects that you're working on, because you'll never lose those characteristics. So when we think about our personal brand, I like to do what I call the 3 keyword process. The 3 keyword process is 1 hard or soft keyword. It goes 1 to 2. So you either have 1 keyword that is hard or soft, and I'll define this, and then 2 other keywords that are hard or soft. So a hard keyword is what we physically do, or what we, type on our computers and do, and that might be a ceramics master, that might be an engineer, that might be a writer. That's a hard keyword. That's essentially what we do for a living, or what we do as our side hustle. A soft keyword is all those beautiful adjectives that can describe us, right? Like analytical, funny, warm, decisive. Those are soft keywords. So we want to pick 1 from 1 column and then 2 from another column. And this is how we live our brand. This is how we live our personal brand. And we're going a little bit older. Older. That's definitely true. I'm really tired right now. A little bit over. I'm going to answer 1 more question, and then feel free to message me on Twitter publicly. Please don't slide in my DMs, because my DMs are crazy. Feel free to tweet me on Twitter, and I'm happy to answer more questions. But I'm going to answer just whatever is the next one, which is any types of posts that you feel are the best to draw engagement. Gosh, this is a great question. This is a great question because the answer is really fuzzy. So if you work in a field that's, say, financial or healthcare, etc., what draws an audience is going to be really different than if you're trying to sell wacky balloons. And the kind of posts that will be optimal for that industry will be very different than for a more conservative industry. So that's also how I like to think about things. I like to think about things in terms of, is the industry more restrictive, or is the industry pretty open and you can say a lot more, you can do a lot more? Because the last thing, I have a great lawyer, the last thing you want to do is get in trouble with any regulations around your industry if that's the case. And if your industry doesn't have regulations, I mean, it really depends on the temperament of who is in your industry. So if your industry is vegan food, you probably aren't going to be talking a lot about meat instead. Well, maybe you will be, and saying like, you know, this is the meat alternative, but you probably won't be necessarily making a really angry brand. Maybe you will. It really depends on what your demographic is. So picking out the right kind of content that suits your direct demographic you're trying to sell to, that's more important. What kind of content do they already consume? Do they like to see images? Do they like to see writing? Do they like to see short form videos? And starting to create in that vein first before expanding out into different kinds of content is going to be super, super helpful. Okay, guys, so thank you so much for everything. I hope this was fun.
Thank you for coming in today and sharing all your expertise.